Stage 6, let's go. So before we start adding to the main assembly, let's make sure we've got everything open. So I've got the main assembly. I've also got those 3 new parts, the large bush, the longer axle, and the bevel gear. Before we start adding to the main assembly, we're going to make that small 6 sub-assembly. Let's go to the axle and let's go to File, Make Assembly from Part. Then just choose that axle and we'll insert it fixed to the origin. This should be the axle that's 9 long. So if you've got a smaller one, you might just need to click on it and choose the 9 long configuration. Then let's insert the 2 remaining parts. So go to Insert Components, insert the bevel gear, and you might need to spin it around. And also insert the large bush, and you might need to spin that as well. Then let's add our mates. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and I'm going to select a circular face inside the bevel gear and also a circular face on the outside edge of the axle. I'm going to make those concentric and I'm going to lock the rotation by expanding the mates, right clicking on that concentric mate and pressing lock rotation. Then if we look at the instructions, the end of the bevel gear is lined up with the end of the axle. So let's add a coincident mate between those 2 faces. It should look something like that. Then next, let's position the bushing. So select a circular face on the bushing, can be any one, and also select a corresponding circular face on the axle and make those concentric. Now it doesn't matter too much which way you get this round, but technically, according to the instructions, the side of the bush part with the cutouts should be on the same side as the gear. So if yours is in the opposite direction, you can just right click on your concentric mate and then press Flip Mate Alignment. I'm also going to lock the rotation of that bush by right clicking on the concentric mate and pressing lock rotation. And then let's just move the bush up so that it's touching the end of the gear. To do this, you can just add a coincident mate between the bush and the gear. And there we have our fully defined assembly there. So let's save this and call it Stage 6. Now we can add this sub-assembly to the main assembly. So let's go back to the main assembly by pressing Ctrl and Tab. Go to Insert Components and choose that Stage 6 sub-assembly. I'm then just going to line the axle up with the holes that it goes through. So I'm going to choose a circular face on that sub-assembly, and then I'm going to choose one of those holes and make those concentric. For this one, we don't need to lock the rotation because we actually want this part to spin, because that's what drives the rotor blades and the tail rotor. We are going to set the distance though, so I'm going to select this face and also the back of the bush and make those coincident. And then finally, to finish off, we just need to add another gear at the back. So if we hold down Control, we can left click and drag from an existing part. So let's do that with that gear. Hold down Control, left click and drag, and then release the left click to place a new gear. Let's select a circular face inside that gear and also a circular face on the axle and make those concentric. Now at this stage, just make sure that your gear is actually properly lined up with your axle. If it's a bit misaligned like this, then you might just need to select a flat face inside the axle hole on the gear and then a corresponding flat face on the axle and just make those parallel. So it should be lined up properly like that. And then finally, let's just select this end face of the gear and also the end face of the axle and make those coincident. And we can see we've got a small gap there. That doesn't really matter at this stage, it just gives a bit of clearance to allow that axle to spin round. And if we zoom out, we can see this is basically the drive shaft that will run the tail rotor. Stage 6 is now complete, so you can save your assembly. In the next section, we'll be moving on to Stage 7, which only has one new part.